Welcome back to Island Tea with your faves, Kevon and Azem featuring Jade, Gwen Johnson.
Hey, Kevon. Hey, so friend of the show,
Mm-hmm.
the medical chief of staff, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, who listens all the time, he decided to call in and help us with some of the questions that we were having. Good morning, Dr. Wilkinson.
Good morning. I'm here at the hospital, and with me is Dr. Osborne, surgeon at the hospital also. And I heard the questions that you were posing this morning, and I wanted to attempt to address some of them.
Awesome.
So we can have some, all of them, you said?
No, I said awesome. I said awesome.
Okay. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, because one of the questions that was raised was the focus that was put on the vaccine as if it was the silver bullet. Mm-hmm. And I want to address that up front now, in that we are dealing with a deadly virus that has killed millions across the globe, that has killed thousands in the Caribbean. And here in St Kitts, we have been fortunate that we have not had any deaths so far. And there are several layers that one can use for protection. The same way if you're in the winter, there are several layers of clothing that you have to put on to keep yourself warm. And one of the layers that we used initially was the social distancing, the wearing the mask, the hand sanitizing, and that layer continues. But in addition to that, we have a more important, very thick jacket that we can use to help to protect us. Okay, but the same way you can put on the best winter coat, but you might still have some coldness coming in, it's the same way with the vaccine. Okay, now the vaccine is our best defense in this fight, but it is not the only defense. Mm-hmm. And as the science unrolls, we are learning more and more about the protection that the vaccine offers. And so as more and more persons get vaccinated, and as more time passes, we now know that by getting vaccinated, you can decrease your risk of even catching COVID by 63 to 83%. Mm-hmm. And so the more persons in the population who can come in contact with COVID and not spread it through getting vaccinated, the more we'll be able to eliminate it. We also know that life is important, and that the vaccine, when you're fully vaccinated, gives you an 83% or 84% risk reduction in severe disease, and almost 100% reduction in you dying from the disease. And that is also significant. And these are the reasons why we advocate that persons get vaccinated. We also know that if you reach a certain critical threshold in any population, you can help to decrease the spread of the virus. And that threshold is what we speak about when we talk about herd immunity. But it's also important for us to know that herd immunity is not an on and off switch. It is not a panacea. And so we don't get to herd immunity and drop everything and say we are protected. Because until the virus is completely eliminated, we will still have to do certain things like wearing our mask, etc., to have to control the spread. I pause there so that you can ask any other questions.
Well, I mean, that's very helpful what you said, and the way that it was phrased, because I believe that a lot of people, felt as though the messaging was, like you said, the silver bullet, but understanding that the vaccine is just one more measure that we are putting in place to help us deal with the pandemic and the virus is definitely a good way of phrasing it. I guess a way that really resonates more with what the reality is. One of the questions that I asked, and I know there's several people who are asking it, is based on a fear that the vaccine and people who choose for whatever reason, whether it is a health reason, whether it is some skepticism or hesitancy, don't take the vaccine, would be somehow limited in ways that would affect their daily lives. And there's a real concern about that.
Okay, but let me address that here, okay? Because one cannot have an argument in isolation or in a vacuum.
Right.
And off here, I was having a conversation with Jade, and I hope she doesn't mind me speaking about the conversation we're having. Jade?
No, it's fine.
Okay, so one of the questions that I asked her is this. I said, if tomorrow you got a call from the task force saying one of the workers at WINN FM had a significant contact with somebody who was positive for COVID, and because of the nature of the studio, etc., and the close contact with everyone working there, you all will have to be quarantined, okay, to have to decrease the spread. What would happen? Her response was that you will work from Zoom. And I said that was great, but it's not every business that can do that. And for some businesses, having to close for 14 days could mean going out of business.
Right.
And so while to get vaccinated is a voluntary effort, the measures to contain spread, they are mandatory, okay? And you will have to make a decision for yourself whether or not you can afford to go into quarantine if you're exposed by the actions of someone who, if you're exposed by someone who is positive and they themselves had chosen not to get vaccinated and not to get the 63 to 83% reduction in spreading the virus. Okay, and so there is a delicate balance that has to be walked. And it is okay for one to say the vaccine is voluntary, but businesses and persons themselves have to take into consideration the consequences that can occur. For example, the schools are now closed down. Okay, yes, we can say teachers can voluntarily go forward and get vaccinated, but we also could have had a situation where almost every teacher was vaccinated. And so even though we heard about the spread within a school, one could have made a decision based on risk that it was still okay for us to continue school and for persons to operate safely.
Excuse me, but Dr. Wilkinson, that's something that I think is important to stress, because that is one of the questions that I hear people talking about in relation to the quarantine and persons being asked to isolate based on close contact or significant contact with somebody who has been exposed. What you're saying is that if somebody was exposed or had significant contact, and there's a possibility that they may have, contracted the disease, the vaccinated status of that individual is taken into consideration with the measures that the task force would ask them to comply with?
Yes, and let me explain what's close contact. And you have to understand that the science is evolving. So, for example, when we started out a year ago, there was no vaccine. Okay, and
right.
So the part has to change as we move along. Also, the more persons who get vaccinated. Can you hear me, sir? Or do you decline?
No, we're hearing you.
No, it's just that there was a call that was coming through on my phone that I was trying to decline. Yes. Where was I now? Yes. So let's first have a clear understanding of what is a significant contact. Okay? Because a significant contact is not by you passing somebody on the street or happening to be in the same store with someone who eventually were told that they were positive. That's not a significant contact. A significant contact is if you had face-to-face contact, especially if it's if it's less than 6 feet and for more than 15 minutes with somebody who turned out to have been symptomatic or positive. So that's a significant contact. And so sometimes when someone gets a call and said, and we found out that they were positive. No, sometimes if you have a patient who comes in symptomatic, you test them and they are positive, we will do the contact tracing and get the names of the persons they would have come in contact with.
Right.
That would give you a significant number. And in doing the history taking, we will determine whether or not this was significant or not, whether or not it was considered high risk or low risk. And so it is not everyone who would have been in contact with that person would be required to go into quarantine.
Right. But also, so for instance, if I was in close contact with someone and the task force determined that I would that I should isolate until my test results come back. But I'm vaccinated. Does the task force then start tracing my contacts as well, or is it does the fact that I have been vaccinated come into play?
That comes into play because if you're fully vaccinated, your risk of spreading it to someone else is significantly less, and so all those things are factored in, and it will determine whether or not this was a high risk contact or low risk contact.
Right. I think that is important.
The point about herd immunity also is that the more persons in the community who get vaccinated, and we are at a point now where we should be crossing 60% of adults over the age of 18 who would have had their first shot. Okay, and so the more persons who are protected is the less stringent the quarantining protocols will become.
Right.
Okay, because one of the things that we always have to balance is the fear of overwhelming our healthcare system.
Right.
And if it were, we did not have a significant proportion of the population vaccinated, and the virus got into the community, we would have hundreds of thousands of persons showing up at our hospital, and the healthcare system will become overwhelmed. But the vaccine itself helps to protect against that. We saw in the UK with the mass vaccination program rollout, the death has decreased 99%. Hospitalizations are down. Okay, and so the vaccine works, and we are in a unique situation here where we started our vaccination rollout before we had overwhelming infection, etc. These 20-something cases that we saw recently, one can assume that if we were not so far advanced in our vaccination program, we would have had more persons presenting with illness.
Definitely. I think that, and I could speak for everybody here on the show, where we, encourage persons who can get the vaccine to go out and get their vaccine. However, you spoke about businesses making decisions. Like, I believe, and I said this, I think that private businesses will have to make decisions based on what is best for the company. I have no issue there.
Yeah.
The issue I have is where we have a situation where the fear is that essential services, things that people need to do to survive, becomes the access to that becomes dependent on the vaccine. Is it? Can one say that? Let me not say one. I'll ask you. Would you say that you advocate for, let's say, discrimination to access to whether it is businesses, services, areas based on vaccination status?
What I advocate is for more and more persons to go and get vaccinated, so that if we have a significant majority of persons moving around in the community who are vaccinated, even if they come in contact with the persons who cannot be vaccinated or refuse to be vaccinated, the risk of viral transmission is low. What I can also say too is that there are certain areas where the viral transmission can be significantly increased. For example, mass gatherings. And so for now, I am for, if you are having a mass gathering, for example, if you're having a football match, a cricket match, etc., that one can control the number of persons entering there by, for now, saying that it is only open to vaccinated persons. I don't know how that can be considered discrimination, but until we get a significant proportion of the population vaccinated, we will not be able to move around normally. And the backside that persons don't see is, if we don't do that, we would have a significant number of persons showing up at our health institutions, overwhelming our health system. It's okay for us to say we have 25 ventilators, but what if we need to ventilate 100 persons? Are you saying that we should have 100 ventilators? And what if we got 100 ventilators and we have to ventilate 200 persons? Are we going to keep buying ventilators when we know that we can control it? It's like if you have a pipe that is dripping and you know that you can fix that leak before you have a flood in the house.
Right. I think that is one of the things that we have been really stressing, the fact that we have to recognize that there is a limit on the resources available to the health sector, right? And so we have
There's
to
a limit in any country.
Right,
we
exactly.
saw even with United States.
Right.
We saw even in big mega cities, New York City, etc. early on.
Right.
The healthcare system became overwhelmed. We saw it happening in Europe, and we must learn from these examples.
Yeah, I do. However, think that you know, the concern for people, like you use an example like for sporting events and mass gatherings and stuff like that, and I think people generally understand that, and that is not the main concern. I do believe the main concern, however, is access to certain things that are considered essential, being able to buy groceries. Do things that involve work and that kind of thing. So I think that's
no barrier to anything like that. There is no barrier to anything like that at all.
Right.
Okay. And one of the things that I want to make here is that we don't have a monopoly on ideas. We don't have a monopoly on tone, pitch, messaging, etc. And that is why I have said repeatedly, this is why we say it's an all-of-society approach. That is why I've said everyone who have their platform, they can use their platform to give out information. So I might not say it the way one would like to hear it, but Kevon might, or you might. And so we all have to play our part.
Yeah, but definitely. Thanks for calling in. We know you're busy. You know you have things going on, and thanks for taking the opportunity to answer some of our questions. Really appreciate it. You know, friend of the show, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson again, everybody.
Well, what I can tell you though, don't worry. I'm in the clinic now, and anybody who complains now about waiting, I'm going to tell them to call you.
Yes, and tell them to listen to Island Tea every morning, 8 to 10. All right, thank you.
Okay, take care, bye.
Again, that was Dr.